Hello again. My last object, if you remember, was the Ofsted report of Summerhill School 1999, and I told a few stories. So the object this time, object number 19, is the good old clipboard. And I've got some stories about this. So we're looking at the clipboard as object 19. Now the thing about clipboard is we'll start with some really positive stuff about the clipboard, and then I'll tell some stories about the clipboard and the 99 inspection, and yeah. So clipboards are quite important at Summerhill because they help us in terms of electing our committees. We have quite a few committees during each term. We can have, like in the September term, we could have a Guy Fawkes committee, a half-term committee, an end-of-term committee. We could have a fair trade committee. If we feel that the committee is a bit quiet in terms of activities and things, we can vote a social committee. We also have end of term what is called a bar committee, which is not to do with alcohol. It's to do with what's called free bar that happens at the end of term at just after midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. The bar committee will sort of give out free food like bits of pizzas or crisps and drinks and things. So it's a committee that raises money in order to help fund the end of term committee, and in order to fund sort of food and non-alcoholic drink during the end of term parties. So there's quite a few committees. There's also things like we've elected ombudsman, and we elect well, a whole group. Betty's officers we elect every term, and Betty's officers are those students that put people to bed at night according to each area has its own bedtimes, and they also wake people up in the morning at the wake up time, which is normally the same for everyone. But yeah, so shall we have a look? Well, with the clipboard, what you do is that you, in order for a committee that someone proposes, they say, I propose at the community meeting in the lounge. Everyone's in a circle around the chair, who's standing next to the old fireplace, normally leaning against it if they're just relaxed. And someone will have a business in the meeting. They would have queued up before the meeting started. There's a queue in front of the secretary, who sits next to the chair by the fireplace, and the secretary takes all the names down and writes down how many cases each person's got. And also, in terms of, it depends on the laws and things, but they used to sort of make sure that the younger children might have all their cases first, so that the community could focus on the younger children's cases, and then the younger children, if they get bored or don't want to take part in the rest of the meeting, they can leave. But that does depend on the laws that control the meeting, which can change. Anyway, so someone would have queued up. They would say to the secretary, look, I've got so many cases. They only have to sort of explain the cases if there's a reason to, in terms of the laws that govern the meeting. But normally just say, I've got 3 cases. And then you sit down, and then you wait for your case to arrive, and it depends on where you were in the queue and where you are on the list, the secretary's list. So eventually they come to your case. They say, Michael, it's your case. And I say, well, I propose that the Fair Trade Committee book goes round. We used to have a fair trade committee. You might have to actually propose, if there isn't one, that we create a fair trade committee, and there's a discussion, and then one of the proposals at the end of the discussion, if it's passed that you create a fair trade committee or any other type of committee, then you might then propose that a book goes round for that committee. So the community vote, and they vote whether the book goes round or not, and normally they vote it does. And so then the chair says, well, who will take the book around? It depends on who's enthusiastic in the meeting. Sometimes no one really is that enthusiastic about taking the book around, and sometimes some students that are, or staff, I've taken the book around a number of times. But the thing about taking the book around is that, one, it's an interesting thing because you have to speak to every single member of the community, all the children, and all the staff, because the first thing you have to do is go around with the book and you explain to the people, if they don't know what the committee is, and then they decide whether they want to run for it or not. And of course there might be a law about the age, so if you're under 12 you might not be able to run for an ombudsman and things like that. So there might be age restrictions on some of them, not on many, but on some of the committees. Anyway, so I think there's an age limit on the bar committee, I'm not sure. Anyway, so you go around and then you make a list once you've gone around every single person. So normally the first thing you have to do before taking the book around is get a printout and tabulate, put it in a table of all the names of all the people within the community. Oh no, it's a bed. Yeah, that's true. Normally that list is actually the bedrooms list, and the bedrooms list also have staff listed on it. So then you take that around, you cross them off as you ask them, do you want to stand for the committee, and you sort of circle those names of those people who want to stand. And then once you've gone around everyone, you then go onto the computer, you make a table of the names of all those people who want to stand, and then you create a lot of columns where you can tick, you can tabulate each of the votes for each person. So and you sort of photocopy that sheet, so you have like a number of those sheets on your clipboard, and then it's your turn to go around again with another bedtime list and get each member of the community to vote. And they normally have enough votes in terms of how many people on the committee. So if there's 7 people on the committee, I think I could get this wrong, then they would have 7 votes. So you make sure you go around everyone, including staff who may not be on site sometimes if they're away for the weekend or whatever. And then once you've got all the votes and you crossed off all the names on the bedroom list that they voted, then and only then can you then count up the votes, and then you put a list of those, with that, not in order of who won, but the list of the 7 names in random order onto a sheet, and that sheet goes on the notice board. Normally I think it's the committee notice board, which used to be sort of opposite the kitchen in the corridor there. So the clipboard is very, very important for democracy at Summerhill in terms of all the committees. There was actually you can get investigation committees and things like that, but normally investigation committees would be like a group of two students, and that they would be possibly elected for a show of hands in the community meeting. But so that's quite a detailed description of clipboard use at Summerhill. Now we're going to go on to about the inspectors. Now we had been inspected in 1998, as I said before in my previous episode, and Neville Grenier had been in charge of that inspection, and he was, as I said, was nicknamed Father Christmas. And we had there was a long discussion with Neville and an attempt to actually try and discuss and collaborate between the school and Ofsted about how we should be inspected in the future. We didn't know we were going to be inspected a year later. That came as a shock and a surprise, but we realised that there were issues that Ofsted had, which they clearly stated, and we were discussing with Neville about what kind of evidence could we provide without conflicting with our philosophies, and we were willing to do anything. As a school, we were always very open. I don't think we ever hid anything from Ofsted, and we were very willing to actually work with them, but so long as we didn't actually sacrifice our own values. I mean, we actually volunteered, and we were the first school inspected according to student voice, when Ofsted eventually had to introduce student voice into their inspections. We were one of the first schools to be inspected in that way. In fact, one of the reasons you could argue why Ofsted had to include student voice was that legally, as a result of the 1999 inspection report, and then the court case that we won, the 1999 inspection report, as a result of that, they tried to close us down, and we refused to do 3 things. One of which was to do with attendance at lessons or private study, which we refused to do. Sort of, our students are allowed to choose what they like during the day in terms of going into the woods, making tree houses, playing, reading, just resting in the sun, climbing trees, playing the piano, drawing, and doing nothing, just idling, chatting and whatever. I mean, that is one of the ones the inspection report in 1999 said the school confuses freedom with the pursuit of idleness. In fact, there were some wonderful quotes from the report, and it was obvious, in fact, that because of the way it was written, it was deliberately written in a sense for the press, because there were so many headline statements, and like that the school and the teachers use foul language, and then various other statements that I think they said about abrogation of duty or something, I don't know, but that they use quite extreme and quotable language in the 99 report on Summerhill. Anyway, going back to the clipboard, Neville Grenier had inspected us, and as I was saying, we were trying to get Ofsted through Neville to actually discuss with us how we could present our results, how we could present what we do with the children, and how we could present especially the things of what they can and do learn outside lessons, not individually what each individual child does, but what children can do and have done in the past, and possibly through research and possibly through doing research before the next Ofsted inspection, but not for us to regularly monitor and report on every student and what they're learning wherever they are. That's one thing we refuse to do. Okay, the thing was, Zoe had asked, when we found out that we were getting another inspection, she asked the Ofsted to come in casuals, because she wanted them to actually fit in and not sort of seem to be power dressed, and not to seem to be, in terms of odds with the values of the school. If they wore their suits and had their clipboards and their pens and everything, then they would feel that we were invaded by an army of suited men and women, which is what they did. And the Children's BBC, some people say, it's quite a caricature of the Ofsted Inspectors in the Children's BBC, but when you were there, that's what it felt like. And in fact, we had asked them beforehand not to dress in suits, not in a sense to come with the clipboards, but to come and try and inspect the school in a manner which would fit the values of the school, which of course they flatly refused to do. This is in stark contrast to the judges in the court case. Before the court case happened, the judges decided they wanted to come and visit the school, the 3 judges, which was quite surprised our solicitor and barrister, and it also surprised the Department for Education. And of course the Department for Education insisted that they accompany the judges, and also our solicitor wanted to accompany them, and the judges were brilliant. They said no, they didn't want anyone with them at all from either side. They wanted to see the school themselves without anyone watching them. So they came, and what do you expect? They dressed down. And one of the judges, I mean, they all just chilled, and one of the judges spent all morning collecting leaves he joined one of the students collecting leaves and putting them into wheelbarrow, and I think putting them in a pile on what would become a bonfire. And so this judge of the Royal Court of Justice was getting dirty, kneeling down and helping the young boy pick up leaves, scooping them up and putting them in the wheelbarrow. Big contrast to the clipboard suited Ofsted inspectors that we'd had. Now, it's interesting that the clipboard inspectors, I saw them, in fact, they were out at lunchtime, one lunchtime. They were rarely out, apart from in terms of the outside of the classroom, but this was a lunchtime, so they spent one lunchtime with the clipboards, and you can see them with the clipboards watching all our students and some staff running around, and the students and staff were playing a game called Flags, Capture the Flag, as a lunchtime game, because, I mean, games go on at any time, either lunch times or in the afternoons or in the evenings. And the thing is that when we saw the inspection report, the inspection evidence for the report, because we were allowed to as it was provided for our solicitors, the sheet they used to assess a game that I think was spontaneous. Someone would have rang the bell and said, let's play Capture the Flag, and they gathered a group together, created teams, and then started playing the game. And there's no one running the game. They all know what the game is and playing the game, and there's no learning objectives to the game. So just imagine what the school inspectors thought, because when you looked at their form that they filled in, it was a lesson observation form. Yeah. So everything about the form was at odds with the nature of the game, and their comments were no one was leading the game. They didn't understand what the aspect of the game was. There seemed to be no learning objectives to the game. So it shows you the total lack of understanding of Summerhill, even when they did one time actually inspect what went on outside the lessons. In fact, there was a second time which failed. There were two, again, suited, clipboarded inspectors, and they followed two of our young girls. I think the girls were quite young. They were probably class 2 at the time or younger. So they would have been about 10, 8, 9, 10, I can't remember now. And the two girls went into the woods for a walk, and in fact to get away from everyone. And then the two girls realised that they were being followed by two suited individuals, and got very scared in a way. They didn't understand, and they ran away and tried to hide. So just imagine what the inspectors would have written on their report. But I mean, yeah. And then this all ended with well, before it ended, I won't go to the end. One of the meetings that I had with them, with the inspectors, straight after us, before one of my lessons, my worst lesson, because I had planned to use the hour before the lesson to double check some of my research and to do some planning and prep in my science lab. But this meeting with 2 inspectors, and there was a group of about 4 of us, or 3 of us, we were reporting to them and discussing with them our 3-year plan and our policy statements and what was happening with our 3-year plan, which I mentioned a lot in my last episode on the inspection report. And during that chat, I said to them, I can't remember what it was in response to. I said, of course, the values you bring into school are at odds with the values of the school. And at this, both inspectors, I think it was a man and a woman, they both stood up. I think the man stood up first and then the woman stood up. And he said, how dare you insult us? We are professionals. We have inspected numerous schools, diverse schools. We know what we're doing. How dare you insult us and say that we're unprofessional? And I said, look, calm down, can't sit there. I said, I wasn't saying you're unprofessional. I'm just saying that the values of this school are so extreme that there is a conflict of values. In fact, in the report, it does state this later on in the report. But to have them standing up, to get 2 Ofsted inspectors so angry that they stand up, simply because I pointed out that their values were, in a sense, they couldn't understand what we were about, really. Which was the case, and for them to then refuse to acknowledge that their professionalism would allow them to inspect any school irrespective of its values. Yeah. And in fact, the court case realised that the values that they were inspected on was a national curriculum, and a national curriculum is a set curriculum, subject by subject and age by age. What should a child know in science at age 8, at age 10, at age 14, at age 15? Very, very incredibly defined levels of attainment and what knowledge and skills and understanding should be shown at each age. And we rejected that totally. And our policy statement was that we don't assess children according to a set programme of what might be expected according to average performance of children in schools. But that's the only way that they were inspecting us at the time. So coming to the end of that clipboarded inspection, the inspectors were feeding back to us, and during that feedback I said to them, I said, well, why? I said, you visited like 30, 40 lessons in the days you were here, so most of the time you were in lessons, and those lessons weren't art room lessons or woodwork lessons, they were academic lessons, classroom lessons. I said, why didn't you inspect us outside the classroom? And one thing they refused to inspect was the meeting, but the only things they inspected outside the classroom was, one, the vain attempt to follow 2 girls into the woods, and secondly was the game of flags. That was all they inspected in terms of outside the classroom. Nothing else, not even the meeting. And Neville Grenier looked at me and he apologised. He said, "I'm sorry, but we didn't find time. It was important for us to be in the lessons, and I'm sorry that we did not inspect enough outside the classroom." And then they went on to say that they were going to recommend that we have compulsory lessons and that we assess our students all the time. And that's when Zoe sort of burst into tears and said, you know, basically what you're saying is you'll close this school down. And behind me is my father, A.S. Neil, the head of A.S. Neil Sculpture. He's watching us. What do you think he would say if he heard you threatening the oldest democratic school in the world and the school that he had created and that his whole life was creating this school? Anyway, that's the Clipboard. Thank you very much indeed.